The desert highway stretched like a vein of black tar under the merciless sun, shimmering with heat that warped the horizon into a mirage of false hope. Sienna Brooks gripped the steering wheel of her battered old sedan, her knuckles white against the cracked leather, as another contraction ripped through her body like a thunderclap. She was alone, 8 months pregnant, miles from the nearest town, with nothing but the whine of her overtaxed engine and the empty road ahead. Sweat soaked her sundress, plastering it to her swollen belly, and her breaths came in shallow gasps. The baby was coming too early, too fast, and the pain blurred her vision until the world tilted. She swerved, tires screeching against the asphalt, and the car fishtailed to a stop on the shoulder, dust billowing like a shroud. Sienna slumped over the wheel, a low moan escaping her lips, her hands clutching her side as if to hold back the inevitable. No one knew she was out here. No one was coming. The isolation pressed in heavier than the heat, a silent scream of abandonment that echoed the betrayals she'd fled from. Miles behind, the thunder of engines grew louder, a rolling storm on 2 wheels. Mason Rook Bennett led the convoy, his weathered Harley rumbling beneath him like a loyal beast. At 42, Rook carried the weight of old scars, tattoos snaking up his arms from a war that had taken his brother and left him with nightmares that woke him in cold sweats. The Iron Promise MC was his family now, 50 strong, a brotherhood forged in the fires of lost battles and unbreakable oaths. They were en route to a rally in the Badlands, the wind whipping their cuts emblazoned with the club's emblem, an iron chain wrapped around a promise scroll. Rook's eyes, sharp behind aviator shades, scanned the road ahead, always vigilant. He'd made a vow long ago, after pulling a kid from a burning wreck in some forgotten desert skirmish, to never ride past those in need. It was the code that kept the ghosts at bay. The lead bikes crested a rise, and there it was, the stalled car, hood up like a white flag of surrender. A woman crumpled against the door, Rook's gut twisted. He signaled with a gloved fist and the convoy slowed, engines growling down to a wary purr. The bikers fanned out, forming a protective semicircle around the vehicle, their shadows stretching long across the sand. Dust settled in the sudden quiet, broken only by the distant cry that pierced the air. A woman's labored sob, raw and desperate. Rook killed his engine first, boots hitting the ground with a thud that echoed his resolve. "Easy, brothers," he murmured, voice gravelly from years of road dust and unspoken regrets. He approached the car, peering through the open window. Sienna's face was pale, slick with perspiration, her eyes wide with terror as she clutched her belly. "Help! The baby! It's coming!" she whispered, her voice fracturing like dry earth. Rook's mind raced, but his hands moved with the steady calm of someone who'd patched wounds under fire. He opened the door gently, supporting her as she slid out, her legs buckling beneath her. "Breathe, darling. We've got you." The other bikers dismounted in a ripple of leather and steel, big men with beards and bandanas, their faces hardening into masks of purpose. Jax, the club's medic and a former combat nurse, pushed forward, his kit already slung over his shoulder. "Clear some space," Rook ordered, and hands that could crush bone now unfolded tarps from saddlebags, creating an impromptu shelter against the blazing sun. The air smelled of hot metal and sagebrush, the convoy's engines ticking as they cooled, a mechanical heartbeat underscoring the urgency. Sienna leaned against Rook's broad chest, her breaths ragged as Jax knelt beside her. "How far along?" he asked, his voice cutting through the haze. 8 months, she gasped, wincing as another wave hit. The bikers worked in silent efficiency, passing water bottles, shading her with jackets, one even rigging a makeshift curtain from a spare bandana for privacy. Rook held her hand, his calloused fingers enveloping hers, an anchor in the storm. Memories flickered unbidden. His own wife's miscarriage years back, the empty crib that still haunted his garage. He shoved them down. This wasn't about him. "You're safe now," he said softly. "No one's leaving you out here." As the contractions intensified, the desert seemed to hold its breath. Jax's hands were steady under the tarp, guided by the faint glow of a flashlight pulled from a vest pocket. The bikers formed a human wall, blocking the wind and prying eyes from the empty road. Whispers passed among them, stories of roadside rescues, oaths renewed in the face of chaos. Rook watched Sienna's face contort, her cries muffled against his shoulder, and something stirred in him. A forgotten promise resurfacing like an old engine roar. This child, born here amid the roar of Harleys and the grit of the wild, would carry their mark, not of blood, but of bond. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in fiery streaks, when the first cry shattered the tension. Jax lifted the tiny, squirming form, wrapped in a clean bandana, his grin fierce through the sweat. "It's a boy. Strong little fighter." Sienna reached out, tears carving tracks through the dust on her cheeks, and cradled him close. The baby quieted against her, his tiny fists waving like flags of victory. Rook looked down at the child, the farrel lights of the bikes casting a halo around them, and felt the weight of the moment settle. "Harley," he said, the name slipping out unbidden, evoking the thunder that had brought them here. Not for the machine, but for the freedom it symbolized, the promise of a life unchained. The brothers nodded, a murmur of approval rippling through the group. In that instant, under the vast, indifferent sky, a new family was forged, threads of loyalty weaving tighter than any chain. But as Sienna's strength returned, her eyes met Rook's with a shadow of secrets unspoken. Why was she out here alone, running from shadows that lingered like exhaust fumes? The convoy revved to life once more, ready to escort her to safety. But Rook sensed the road ahead held more than dust and distance. The baby's name was just the beginning, a vow that would bind them all, testing the iron of their promise against trials yet to come. The engines roared in unison, carrying them forward into the twilight, where redemption waited like a distant beacon. The convoy moved like a shadowed serpent through the deepening dusk, engines humming a low symphony that drowned out the baby's soft whimpers. Rook rode point, his Harley cutting the wind. With Sienna cradled in the sidecar, Jax a jury-rigged from spare parts and a reinforced frame. The tarp fluttered around her like a makeshift cocoon, shielding the newborn Harley from the chill that crept in with the fading light. The scent of cooling asphalt mingled with the faint, milky warmth of new life, a contrast to the gritty exhaust that trailed behind. 50 bikes stretched in a vigilant line, their headlights piercing the twilight like stars fallen to earth, escorting this fragile cargo toward the distant glow of a small-town hospital. Rook's jaw tightened under his beard. He'd seen too many roads end in regret, too many promises broken by the indifference of miles. This one, though this child born under their watch, felt like a thread pulling him back from the edge. Sienna shifted slightly, her hand resting protectively over Harley's bundled form. Exhaustion etched lines into her face, but her eyes held a flicker of gratitude amid the haze of painkillers Jax had administered from his kit. "You didn't have to do this," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the roar. Rook glanced down, his shades pushed up on his forehead now, revealing eyes weathered by sun and sorrow. "Iron promise," he replied simply, the club's name a vow etched into his soul. It started with his brother, back in the sands of a forgotten conflict, where they'd sworn to stand for the overlooked. The war had claimed Tom, left Rook with shrapnel scars and a hollow ache, but the club had filled the void, brothers who'd trade their last breath for the code. Tonight, that code had extended to her, to this boy who'd entered the world with the grit of the road in his lungs. As they crested the final hill, the hospital lights bloomed like a beacon, the sign reading Hope Valley Medical Center flickering against the night. The convoy pulled into the lot with a coordinated growl, drawing stares from late-night staff spilling out for a smoke break. Nurses paused, coffee cups forgotten, as the bikers dismounted in a wave of leather and purpose. Jax hopped off first, scooping Sienna and the baby with the ease of someone who'd carried the wounded through minefields. "We need a room now," he said to the wide-eyed orderly at the ER doors, his tone brooking no delay. Rook followed, his boots echoing on the linoleum as they wheeled her inside. The sterile air hit like a slap, antiseptic sharpness cutting through the desert's lingering dust. Monitors beeped in rhythmic welcome, and a doctor in rumpled scrubs hurried over, clipboard in hand. In the quiet of the exam room, with Harley swaddled in a hospital blanket now, Sienna's story began to unravel like a frayed rope. The doctor confirmed the baby was healthy, small but fierce, lungs clear from that first cry under the stars. As IV fluids dripped steadily, Sienna's gaze drifted to Rook, who lingered by the door like a sentinel, arms crossed over his cut. The other bikers waited outside, a wall of solidarity against the curious glances from the waiting area. I was running," she confessed, her voice a whisper laced with shame and relief. "From him, my husband. He didn't want this baby, didn't want me leaving. Said it'd be easier if I just disappeared." Her fingers traced the edge of the bedrail, avoiding the faint bruises shadowing her wrist, marks of a grip too tight, too possessive. Rook's expression darkened, not with anger, but a quiet storm brewing. He'd heard echoes of this before, women cast adrift by men who twisted love into chains. His own past flickered. The night he'd found his wife broken after a bar fight gone wrong, the promise he'd made then to shield the vulnerable. "No more running alone," he said, his voice low and steady. "You're under our watch now." Jax nodded from the corner, repacking his kit, while a nurse cooed over Harley, the boy's tiny fingers curling around her thumb. Outside, the brothers murmured plans, scouts to check the roads behind, eyes on the horizon for any tail. The club wasn't just riders, they were guardians, their loyalty a shield forged in the heat of shared scars. But as the hours ticked toward midnight, a shadow crept into the room. The doctor returned with a furrowed brow, holding a chart. "Miss Brooks, your records. There's a note from your last clinic. Restraining order pending, but it mentions concerns about your safety, and someone called in, asking if you'd arrived." Sienna's face paled, her hold on Harley tightening. Rook stepped closer, sensing the undercurrent of threat like oil on water. Who would prefer she never made it here? A husband with a temper sharpened by control, perhaps backed by connections that turned blind eyes to his rages. The air thickened with unspoken peril, the hospital's hum now a fragile barrier against the night. Rook pulled out his phone, thumbing a quick text to the club president, an old war buddy named Vance, who'd lost a leg but not his fire. "We ride with her tomorrow," he decided aloud, the words sealing another layer of the promise. Sienna looked up, tears glistening. "Why? You don't know me." He met her eyes, the weight of old oaths pressing down. "Because we know what it's like to be left behind. And Harley's one of us now, born on the promise." The baby stirred, letting out a soft coo that cut through the tension, a reminder of innocence amid the gathering storm. Dawn's first light filtered through the blinds as the convoy reformed, engines idling like patient beasts. Sienna, discharged with Harley in a carrier strapped securely, climbed into a borrowed truck from the club's fleet, safer for the road ahead. Rook rode beside her, the brotherhood flanking like iron wings, but in the rear view a distant set of headlights flickered uninvited, hinting at pursuits yet to unfold. The desert whispered warnings on the wind, carrying the scent of sage and secrets as they pressed on toward a safe house tucked in the Badlands. Loyalty had bound them, but the true test loomed: justice for a woman and child who'd found family in the roar of the road. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The safe house squatted on the edge of the Badlands like a forgotten relic, its weathered adobe walls blending into the rust-red cliffs that clawed at the sky. Dawn's pale light crept over the horizon, casting long shadows from the convoy as it pulled into the gravel yard, tires crunching like brittle bones underfoot. Rook cut his engine first, the sudden silence amplifying the distant howl of coyotes fading into the morning. Sienna sat rigid in the truck's passenger seat, Harley nestled against her chest in a sling improvised from a soft leather vest, his tiny breaths a rhythmic counterpoint to the settling dust. The air hung heavy with the scent of creosote bushes and engine oil, a gritty perfume that spoke of isolation and hard-won refuge. The brothers dismounted with practiced ease, forming a loose perimeter as Vance, the club president, emerged from the porch. His prosthetic leg thudded softly against the wooden steps, a reminder of the IED that had stolen more than his mobility. It had forged his unyielding sense of duty. At 50, Vance's face was a map of creases from squinting into desert suns and staring down betrayals, his graying beard framing eyes that missed nothing. "Rook," he greeted, voice a low rumble like gravel under tires. "Heard the chatter. This the package?" He nodded toward Sienna, who shrank back slightly, her fingers tightening around the baby as if he were the only anchor in this sea of strangers. Rook swung off his bike, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his glove. "Yeah, Sienna Brooks, and her boy, Harley." The name hung in the air, already carrying weight among the men who'd witnessed his arrival. Vance stepped closer, peering at the child with a gentleness that belied his bulk. "Harley, huh? Fitz, born with thunder in his veins." He turned to Sienna, his tone softening. "You're safe here, ma'am. No questions unless you want to ask 'em. But if trouble's trailing, we need to know." The other bikers, Jacks unpacking medical supplies from the truck, others checking the perimeter with watchful eyes, moved like a well-oiled machine, their cuts catching the light, the iron promise emblem glinting like a vow etched in steel. Inside, the safe house unfolded into a sparse haven, a main room with scarred wooden tables, a kitchen corner stocked with canned goods and fresh water from a rain barrel, and a back room with cots piled high with blankets. Sunlight slanted through dusty windows, illuminating motes that danced like fireflies in the beams. Sienna settled onto a couch, exhaustion pulling at her like gravity, while Jax checked Harley's vitals under the hum of a portable monitor. "He's good," Jax assured her, his hands steady from years of battlefield triage. "A little jaundiced from the early start, but nothing a few days won't fix." Sienna nodded, her eyes tracing the faces around her, men who'd traded war stories for road lore, their scars badges of battles fought not for glory, but survival. As the morning wore on, the weight of her secrets pressed heavier. Rook leaned against the doorframe, nursing a mug of black coffee that steamed in the cool air, seeping through the cracks. The aroma mingled with the faint, powdery scent of baby lotion Jax had produced from his kit. "That call to the hospital," Rook said quietly, not pushing, just opening the door. "Who was asking?" Sienna's gaze dropped to Harley, who suckled contentedly, oblivious to the shadows gathering. "Mark," she whispered, the name tasting like ash. "My husband. He's connected. Works with some security firm, but it's more than that. Friends in high places, cops, judges. He always said if I left I'd regret it, that no one would believe me." Vance joined them, easing into a chair with a creak of wood, his presence commanding without intimidation. "We believe you," he said simply. "Seen too many like him, men who hide behind badges or badges themselves, twist the law to fit their fists." His words carried the echo of personal ghosts, a sister lost to a system that looked away, a promise he'd made at her grave to stand against such corruption. The club had roots in that pain, oaths sworn under starlit skies to protect the forgotten, to deliver justice where courts failed. Rook nodded, memories surfacing of his brother's last letter, smudged with sand. "Keep the promise, Rook, for the ones who can't fight back." By midday, the brothers had set up shifts, scouts on bikes patrolling the ridges, radios crackling with updates. The desert outside shimmered under the climbing sun, heat waves distorting the horizon into illusions of escape routes that weren't there. Sienna watched from the window as two riders, Lena and Toro, veterans of the club's inner circle, rode out, their engines fading into the vastness. Lena, a rare woman in the ranks, bore tattoos of phoenixes rising from flames, symbols of her own redemption from a life of foster homes and broken trusts. "Their family," Rook explained, catching Sienna's wary glance. "Chosen, not born. We ride for each other no matter the blood." But the peace fractured in the afternoon hush. Jax's radio buzzed to life, static slicing the air like a warning shot. "Rook, we've got company. Black SUV 2 miles out. Plates look local, could be nothing but—" The words trailed, tension coiling in the room. Sienna's face drained of color, Harley stirring in her arms with a fretful cry. Vance stood, his crutch tapping a steady rhythm. "Get her and the kid to the back. Rook, with me." The air thickened with the scent of impending rain, thunderheads building on the distant peaks, mirroring the storm within. Rook ushered Sienna to the rear room, barricading the door with a heavy dresser. "Stay low," he murmured, his hand lingering on her shoulder, a silent vow. Outside, engines roared to life, the Brotherhood forming a defensive line, dust devils swirling in their wake. The SUV crested the rise, slowing as it approached, its tinted windows reflecting the sun like blind eyes. Vance rode forward alone, a lone figure against the glare, his posture unyielding. "State your business," he called, voice carrying over the idling growl. The driver's door opened, a man in a crisp suit stepping out, Mark Brooks, his face a mask of false concern, eyes cold as polished stone. "I'm looking for my wife, Sienna. She left without a word, heard she might have had the baby." His tone dripped with possession, but beneath it lurked an edge, sharpened by the knowledge that these weren't ordinary road warriors. Vance's grip tightened on his handlebars. "She's not here, and if she was, that's her call." The air crackled with standoff, the desert wind whipping sand against leather, carrying whispers of confrontation. Mark's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You don't know who you're dealing with. I have friends, real authority. This ends now." But as he turned back to the vehicle, a radio chirped from within, urgent voices spilling out about a warrant mix-up, and "stand down." Someone had pulled strings, perhaps a tip from the club's network, old allies in unlikely places. The SUV reversed, taillights fading into the haze, but the threat lingered like exhaust in the still air. Back inside, Sienna held Harley close, tears silent on her cheeks. Rook returned, his expression grim but resolute. "He's gone for now, but this ain't over." Vance gathered the brothers later, under the flicker of lantern light as dusk fell, the sky bruising purple. "We protect our own," he declared, the words a renewal of the iron promise. In that circle of faces, scarred and steadfast, Sienna saw not strangers, but a family forged in fire, loyalty that would face down corruption, redeem the lost, and honor the child who'd bound them all. The night deepened, engines humming softly in vigil as the road to justice stretched onward, paved with quiet courage and unbreakable oaths. The night wrapped the safe house in a velvet shroud, stars pricking the sky like distant campfires, while the wind sighed through the Badlands canyons, carrying the faint tang of sage and lingering rain. Inside, the lantern's glow cast flickering shadows across the rough-hewn walls, turning the faces of the Iron Promise brothers into a tapestry of resolve and weariness. Sienna rocked Harley gently in her arms, the baby's soft gurgles a fragile melody against the low murmur of voices in the main room. The confrontation with Mark had left a chill in the air, thicker than the cooling desert evening, and though the SUV's taillights had vanished hours ago, the echo of its engine haunted the silence like an uninvited ghost. Rook paced the worn floorboards, his boots scuffing softly, each step a measured beat in the rhythm of his thoughts. Vance sat at the head of the table, a topographic map of the surrounding ridges spread before him, marked with grease pencil lines denoting patrol routes and escape paths. Jax leaned against the counter, cleaning a knife with methodical strokes. His eyes distant, memories of triage tense under hostile skies surfacing unbidden. "That warrant mix-up," Vance said, his voice gravelly, breaking the hush. "Our doing, or dumb luck?" Rook shook his head, stopping to pour himself another cup of coffee, the steam rising like a veil. "Club network. Called in a favor from an old contact in county, retired sheriff who owes us from a dust-up years back. But Mark's got pull. Security firm. That's code for private muscle, the kind that bends rules without breaking a sweat." Sienna lingered in the doorway, Harley nestled against her shoulder, his tiny warmth a shield against the knot of fear twisting in her gut. The room's scents, stale smoke from Vance's pipe, the earthy bite of leather polish, grounded her, a stark contrast to the sterile isolation of her old life. She'd overheard the exchange, the weight of their protection settling over her like a borrowed cut. Stepping forward, she cleared her throat, voice tentative but steady. "I didn't ask for this, for any of it." The men turned, their gazes softening, not with pity but understanding, the kind earned through shared scars. Vance gestured to a chair, and she sat, the wood creaking under her. "No one does, ma'am, but promises drag us in anyway." As the lantern flame danced, Sienna's words spilled out, halting at first, then gaining momentum like a bike accelerating on open road. Mark hadn't always been the shadow he became. They'd met in a quieter time. Him a rising star in a firm that guarded corporate secrets, her a nurse fresh from training, drawn to his charm and the promise of stability. But the baby changed everything. Unplanned, unwanted by him. A crack in his polished facade. "He said it was a mistake," she whispered, tracing Harley's downy hair, "that I'd ruin everything. Started with words, then. Holes that left marks I hid under sleeves. Told me if I left, he'd make sure no one believed my side. Friends in the department, he said. They'd call me unstable, say I was the one imagining things." Her eyes met Rook's, searching for doubt, finding none. The bruises on her wrist, faint now under the light, spoke volumes without graphic detail, vestiges of a grip that sought control over freedom. Rook pulled up a stool, close enough to offer presence without crowding, his own past rising like exhaust in his mind. The war had taught him about chains, not just the iron ones on his bike, but the invisible ones of regret and loss. His brother Tom's death, a roadside bomb in a nameless valley, had been the fracture point, leaving Rook adrift until the club welded him back together. "Sounds like a man who's forgotten what honor means," he said, voice low, threaded with the quiet thunder of conviction. "We know that type. Hide behind badges or boards, but underneath, they're hollow. Iron Promise started because of one like him, corruption that cost lives, oaths we swore to counter." Vance nodded, tapping the map. "My sister. Domestic call gone wrong. Cops looked the other way because of who he knew. We don't let that slide anymore. The conversation wove deeper into the night, the brothers sharing fragments of their tapestry, Lena's escape from a cycle of foster betrayals, Toro's redemption after a stint behind bars for defending a neighbor from a crooked landlord. Each story a thread in the club's loom, binding strangers into family. Harley stirred, letting out a yawn that drew soft chuckles, lightening the air like dawn's first ray. Jax offered Sienna a bottle warmed over the stove, his hands gentle. "Kid's got your fight," he said. "Came into the world roaring. We'll make sure he keeps it." For the first time since the roadside collapse, Sienna felt the edges of her fear soften, replaced by a tentative warmth, the realization that loyalty here wasn't transactional, but elemental, like the desert's unyielding stone. But as the clock edged past 2, the radio crackled again, shattering the fragile peace. Lena's voice cut through, edged with urgency. "Rook, movement on the East Ridge. Not bikes, drones maybe. And another vehicle, unmarked. They're probing." The room tensed, chairs scraping as men rose, instincts honed by years on the edge kicking in. Vance's face hardened, the map forgotten. "Scramble the perimeter, no engagement unless they cross the line." Rook glanced at Sienna, who clutched Harley tighter, her pulse racing visible in her throat. "Back room now, lock it down." He guided her there, the doors click a barrier against the encroaching night. But his mind raced ahead. Mark's connections weren't bluffs. This was a siege of shadows, testing the club's resolve. Outside, engines murmured to life, headlights slicing the darkness like blades. The Badlands came alive with the low growl of Harley's circling, a defensive roar that echoed the promise binding them. Rook joined the line, wind whipping his beard as he scanned the horizon. The scent of ozone from distant thunder mixing with adrenaline's sharp bite. Drones hummed faintly overhead, invisible eyes in the black. But the brothers held firm, a circle of iron against the probing unknown. In the safe house's depths, Sienna whispered to Harley, "We're not alone anymore," the words a vow to herself, forged in the fire of this chosen kin. Dawn crept in reluctantly, painting the cliffs in muted golds as the threats receded like retreating tides. No shots fired, no lines crossed, but the message lingered. The hunt was on, corruption's tendrils reaching into the wilds. Vance gathered the weary group at first light, coffee steaming in tin mugs. "We move at noon, head for the rally grounds, neutral turf, more eyes on our side." Nods rippled through. Resolve hardening like cooling metal. Sienna emerged, Harley swaddled securely, her chin lifted. "I'm with you," she said. The decision a bridge crossed. Rook met her gaze, the weight of old oaths mingling with new. In this family of the road, redemption wasn't a destination, but the ride itself, loyalty's engine carrying them through storms toward justice's distant horizon. If this tale of unbreakable bonds is stirring something in you, smash that like button. It helps these stories of quiet courage reach more lost souls on the road. The noon sun hammered down on the Badlands like a forge, turning the gravel yard into a skillet of shimmering heat. Engines idled in a low chorus, the iron promise convoy poised like coiled springs, dust motes swirling in the exhaust haze that carried the sharp bite of overheated metal and sun-baked earth. Rook adjusted the straps on Sienna's carrier in the truck's cab, his gloved hands careful around Harley, who blinked up at him with eyes the color of desert skies, innocent, unaware of the shadows chasing them. Sienna sat beside the infant, her face set in quiet determination, the faint lines of fatigue softened by the resolve that had taken root overnight. The safe house receded in the rear view as Vance gave the signal, a raised fist that sent the bike surging forward in a thunderous wave, tires kicking up ochre clouds that veiled the horizon. Rook rode shotgun in the truck, his Harley secured to a trailer hitch behind, a concession to the need for speed and stability on the winding roads ahead. The Badlands unfolded in a labyrinth of crimson spires and shadowed arroyos. The path to the rally grounds a ribbon of cracked asphalt flanked by jagged rocks that whispered of ancient battles etched into stone. Wind whipped through the open window, tugging at Sienna's hair and carrying the faint, sweet scent of creosote blooming under the relentless light. "You holding up?" Rook asked, his voice cutting through the rumble, eyes flicking to her in the mirror. She nodded, one hand resting on Harley's chest, feeling the steady rise and fall like a metronome of fragile hope. "Better than I thought. It's freeing riding with all of you, like the weights shared." The convoy snaked through the canyons, scouts like Lena and Toro peeling off to flank the ridges, their bikes vanishing into the haze like ghosts on patrol. Vance led from the front, his silhouette a steadfast anchor against the glare, prosthetic leg no hindrance to the lean into curves that tested man and machine. Memories surfaced for Rook as the miles blurred, the war's endless patrols, the vow he'd made over his brother's grave to never abandon the vulnerable on open ground. That promise had birthed the club, a family stitched from the ragged edges of loss. Veterans like Jax, who mended bodies and souls. Outcasts like Lena, who'd found purpose in the roar of engines after years of silence in broken homes. Now it enveloped Sienna and Harley, threads of loyalty weaving them into the fabric without question. But the road wasn't empty. As they crested a rise overlooking a vast basin, Jax's voice crackled over the radio, laced with caution. "Eyes on a tail, 3 vehicles half a mile back. SUVs, unmarked, keeping distance but they're matching pace." Rook's grip tightened on the dash, the leather creaking under his fingers. Sienna's breath hitched, her free hand clutching the door handle as if to brace against an invisible impact. "Mark," she murmured, the name a shadow falling across the sunlit cab. Rook keyed the radio. "Vance, we've got company. Form up. Defensive wedge." The response was immediate. Engines revved in unison, the convoy tightening into a V-shape, the truck shielded at the heart like a precious core. The pursuit unfolded in slow tension, the SUVs closing like predators scenting blood, their forms distorting in the heat waves rising from the tarmac. Rook scanned the mirrors, heart pounding a steady drum against his ribs, the air inside the cab thickening with the metallic tang of fear sweat. "Stay low," he told Sienna, his tone calm steel masking the storm. Flashbacks flickered, a convoy ambush in foreign sands, the crack of gunfire and the acrid smoke of burning fuel, Tom's face lost in the chaos. He'd failed then, but not now, not with this child's life hanging in the balance, a symbol of redemption he couldn't let slip. Harley fussed, a soft cry piercing the growl of tires, and Sienna soothed him with a lullaby fragment, her voice trembling but unbroken. Vance signaled a pull-off at a narrow overlook, the convoy braking in a synchronized halt, dust billowing like a smokescreen. The bikes fanned out, forming a barrier of gleaming chrome and unyielding brotherhood, headlights flashing in warning as the SUVs slowed to a stop 50 yards back. The lead vehicle disgorged 2 men in dark suits, marks enforcers no doubt, faces hard and anonymous under mirrored shades. One stepped forward, hands raised in mock peace, a tablet in his grip glinting under the sun. "We're just here to talk," he called, voice amplified over the wind. "Mrs. Brooks, your husband's worried. Come with us, peaceful. No need for this spectacle." Sienna peered through the tinted glass, her body rigid, Harley's warmth the only tether keeping panic at bay. Rook exited the truck, boots crunching gravel, positioning himself between her and the threat, the club's emblem on his cut a banner of defiance. Vance rode up beside him, engine purring like a restrained beast. "She speaks for herself," Vance rumbled, his gaze locked on the suits, "and she's chosen her road." The air hummed with standoff, the desert silence amplifying every shift of boot on stone, every rustle of wind through sagebrush. The enforcer's smile twisted. You bikers think you're heroes? My boss has warrants. Kidnapping, endangerment, one call and this ends with lights and sirens. But the iron promise didn't flinch. Jax dismounted quietly, his medic patch a subtle reminder of lives saved beyond the law's reach, while Lena circled wide, radio whispering coordinates to unseen allies. Rook felt the ethical coil tighten, confrontation without fists, justice not in vengeance but in standing firm. Tell Mark the promise runs deeper than his connections, Rook said, voice carrying like thunder rolling in. She's free, Harley's free, and if you push, you'll meet the iron in our word. The words hung, a moral gauntlet thrown, echoing the club's founding oath, to counter corruption with unyielding honor, to redeem the lost through quiet strength. Tension peaked as the enforcer thumbed his phone, murmuring into it, but the response came swift, a crackle from their own radio. County dispatch confirming, no warrants active. Stand down or face obstruction charges. The suits exchanged glances, the bluff called by the club's web of favors, old debts from honest badges who'd seen the light of true justice. The vehicles reversed, engines whining in retreat, swallowed by the basin's curve. Cheers rippled low through the brothers, not triumphant roars but nods of shared relief, the scent of victory mingling with the cooling dust. Back on the road, the convoy pressed toward the rally grounds, the sun dipping westward, casting elongated shadows that danced like allies. Sienna exhaled, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks as she rocked Harley. You didn't have to fight for us like that. Rook glanced over, the lines of his face softening in the golden light. We did, because promises aren't kept in words alone. They're ridden out, mile by mile. The rally loomed ahead, a gathering of kindred spirits under banners of solidarity, but Rook sensed the pursuit far from over. Mark's retreat was tactical, a regrouping in the shadows of power. Yet, in this forged family, redemption burned brighter. Loyalty a engine driving them through the gathering dusk toward trials that would test the depth of their iron bond. The horizon beckoned, vast and unforgiving, but not alone. The rally ground sprawled across a sun-scorched valley like a living mosaic of chrome and conviction, tents flapping in the hot breeze like sails on a sea of dust. As the Iron Promise convoy crested the final ridge, the air thrummed with the distant roar of engines and the low hum of generators, carrying scents of grilled meat, spilled beer, and the ever-present tang of gasoline that clung to everything. Banners snapped overhead, emblazoned with club crests from across the Badlands, symbols of oaths renewed under open skies. Rook eased the truck to a stop at the edge of the gathering, the tires sinking into soft earth worn by countless arrivals. The brotherhood dismounted in a ripple of leather and low murmurs, forming a protective cordon around Sienna and Harley as Vance signaled their claim on a prime spot near the central fire pit. Sienna stepped out cautiously, the carrier's straps digging into her shoulders, Harley's weight a comforting anchor amid the chaos. The sun hung low, painting the scene in amber hues that turned the milling crowd into silhouettes of camaraderie. Riders swapping stories around coolers, mechanics tinkering under makeshift awnings, the occasional laughter cutting through the din like sparks from a welder's torch. She'd never imagined sanctuary in a place like this, a far cry from the sterile confines of her old life. But the energy pulsed with an undercurrent of solidarity that eased the knot in her chest. Rook walked beside her, his presence a steady shadow, eyes scanning the faces for any hint of intrusion. "This is neutral ground," he said, voice low against the mounting noise. "Allies everywhere, but stay close." Vance led them to a cluster of tents, pitched by the club's longtime hosts. The Badlands Renegades, a sister outfit with roots as deep as Iron Promises, bound by shared histories of pulling each other from wreckage, both literal and figurative. The president there, a wiry woman named Kira, with silver streaks in her braid and a prosthetic arm from a rally crash years back, greeted Vance with a firm clasp. "Heard you had a wild ride in," she said, her gaze flicking to Sienna and the bundle. "Room for 2 more at the fire tonight?" Vance nodded, the exchange wordless but weighted, a renewal of pacts forged in quieter times. Kira's eyes softened as she peered at Harley. "Little one looks like he belongs. What's his story?" Rook met her look. "Born on the promise, that's all you need." As dusk deepened, the rally ignited into full life. Bonfires crackling to life with pops of sap-rich wood, sending embers skyward like fleeting stars. The air grew thick with the smoky aroma of roasting chiles, and the faint herbal bite of wild tobacco passed in ritual circles. Sienna settled on a log by the flames, Harley dozing in a sling across her lap, lulled by the rhythmic thump of bass from a distant stage where a band hammered out anthems of the road. Brothers from both clubs mingled, voices weaving tales of narrow escapes and hard-won freedoms, stories that echoed her own unspoken burdens. Lena sat nearby, sharpening a knife with deliberate strokes, her phoenix tattoos seeming to flicker in the firelight. "First rally?" she asked Sienna. "Not prying, just bridging the gap." Sienna nodded, watching the sparks dance. "Feels like stepping into another world. One where people actually show up." The conversation flowed like the beer from shared bottles, easing into the night's heart. Rook joined them, passing Sienna a water bottle cool from the ice chest, his calloused fingers brushing hers in a gesture of quiet support. Memories stirred for him here, amid the familiar roar, the rally where he'd first met Vance, both fresh from the sands, swearing oaths over a campfire much like this one. That night had mended fractures from Tom's loss, turning grief into purpose. Now, watching Sienna's tentative smile as Harley stirred with a soft sigh, Rook felt the promise extend, a chain linking past to this fragile present. But the warmth fractured when Jax approached from the shadows, his face taut under the fire's glow. "Radio pickup," he murmured to Rook, pulling him aside. "Word from our county contact. Mark's stirring the pot, filed a missing persons with a twist. Claims you're holding her against her will. Got a judge friend fast-tracking it." Rook's jaw clenched, the fire's heat suddenly oppressive against his skin. The rally's energy shifted in his periphery, laughter from one group, a revving engine from another. But the threat loomed like a cloud edging the stars. Sienna caught the exchange, her hand stilling on Harley's back. "He's doing it, isn't he? Twisting everything." Lena leaned in, voice steady. "We've seen it before. Corruption doesn't ride clean, it slithers. But here we've got eyes and ears, riders from 3 states, some with badges of their own, who remember what honor looks like." Vance, overhearing, rose from his spot across the fire, prosthetic tapping the earth. "No fast track holds against the truth. We'll counter it. Testimonies, witnesses from the hospital. Your word, Sienna, backed by ours." The group's resolve hardened like cooling forge metal, the fire's crackle underscoring their pact. Kira joined, her voice cutting through the night. "Renegades stand with iron. If he sends suits or worse, they meet a wall." Sienna looked around the circle, faces etched with scars of their own redemptions. Vance's unyielding gaze, Lena's quiet fire. Jax's healers calm, and felt the isolation of her flight dissolve. These weren't saviors from storybooks, they were flesh and blood kin, chosen through trials that mirrored her pain. Harley cooed, tiny fingers grasping at the air, and she whispered to him, "This is family, little one, the kind that rides through storms." But as the band struck up a slower tune, guitars wailing like wind through canyons, a new shadow crept in. A lone rider pulled up at the rally's perimeter, engine cutting off with a final sputter. He dismounted slowly, helmet tucked under arm, his cut unmarked. A ghost from the edges. Rook tensed, recognizing the stance. One of Mark's old associates, a fixer from the security world, eyes scanning the crowd with predatory focus. The man approached the fire circle unhurried, hands open, but posture coiled. "Mason Bennett," he called, using Rook's given name like a hook. The group stilled, flames reflecting in narrowed eyes. Message from Brooks, he wants a sit-down. Tomorrow, neutral spot. Bring the woman and kid, or the law comes heavy. Warrants, raids, the works. Rook stood, towering against the firelight, the scent of smoke clinging to his beard. Tell him the promise doesn't negotiate, she's chosen her path. The fixer smirked, but it faltered under the collective stare of the circle, loyalty's weight pressing like an unseen force. He backed away, remounting with a nod that promised no retreat. As his taillight faded into the night, Vance gathered the brothers closer, voices low. Prep for dawn. Scouts out, contingencies ready. This tests us all. Sienna held Harley tighter, the baby's warmth a beacon amid the gathering tension, her heart swelling with a fierce gratitude. In this forge of the road, redemption wasn't solitary. It was shared, oaths binding them against the corruption's tide. The rally's pulse continued around them, oblivious engines revving into the dark. But within the circle, resolve burned brighter than the dying embers. Rook met Sienna's eyes across the flames, a silent vow passing between them, the iron promise holding firm, carrying them toward the confrontation that would define their forged family. The stars wheeled overhead, witnesses to courage's quiet roar as the night deepened into anticipation's embrace. The first light of dawn sliced through the rally grounds like a blade, turning the dew-kissed tents into silhouettes of quiet vigil. The air hung crisp with the scent of damp earth and dying embers, the night's revelry reduced to scattered bottles and the faint echo of guitars fading into the morning hush. Rook stood at the edge of the camp, his breath visible in the chill, gloved hands flexing against the cold metal of his Harley. The fixer's message lingered like exhaust in his mind. A sit-down with Mark, neutral ground at an old roadside diner 20 miles out. No tricks, the man had said, but Rook knew better. Corruption thrived on false flags. Around him, the Iron Promise brothers stirred, engines coughing to life in a low symphony that roused the valley. Vance limped over, coffee mug steaming in his grip, the aroma sharp and grounding. "We ride as one," he said, voice a rumble of unyielding stone. "No deals, just truth." Sienna emerged from the tent, Harley bundled against her in a makeshift papoose of soft flannel, his tiny face peeking out with wide, curious eyes. The rally's energy had shifted overnight, from boisterous camaraderie to focused purpose, the Badlands renegades pitching in with extra scouts and a truck for the baby's comfort. Kira clasped Sienna's shoulder, her prosthetic arm a cool weight of solidarity. "You've got roots here now," she murmured, the words weaving into the dawn's promise. Sienna nodded, the knot of fear in her chest loosening under the weight of this chosen kin, women like Lena, who'd clawed her way from abandonment, and men like Jax, whose healer's hands had steadied her through the impossible birth. For the first time, freedom felt tangible, not a fleeting dream chased down empty roads. The convoy rolled out at first full light, a steel serpent winding through the valley's twists, dust trailing like a banner of defiance. Rook led the flank on the truck, wind whipping his beard and carrying the faint, powdery scent of Harley's newness through the open window. The diner loomed ahead, a weathered relic squatting off the highway, faded neon sign buzzing faintly, parking lot empty, save for a single black SUV gleaming under the rising sun. Mark waited outside, arms crossed over a tailored jacket, his face a mask of calculated calm that cracked at the sight of the approaching thunder. Flanked by two suits, enforcers with bulges under their coats, he straightened, but the arrival of 50 bikes fanning out in a protective arc stripped any illusion of control. Engines idled to a predatory growl, the air thick with the metallic tang of tension and sun-warmed asphalt. Vance dismounted first, prosthetic thudding against the gravel, Rook at his side like a shadow forged in fire. Sienna stayed in the cab, Harley quiet against her, but her eyes locked on the scene through the glass, pulse racing with the echo of past threats. Mark's gaze flicked to the truck, hunger and rage flickering before he schooled it. "This ends today," he called, voice slicing the hush. "Sienna, come out. These thugs can't protect you forever." Rook stepped forward, boots crunching, the club's emblem catching the light like a vow etched in sunlight. "She's not yours to command, and we're not thugs. We're the promise you broke." The words hung, moral weight pressing down, drawing murmurs from the brothers who formed a human wall, their presence a silent testament to loyalty's unbreaking chain. Mark's enforcers shifted, hands twitching toward hips, but Vance's raised hand halted them, his stare unblinking. "No games. You filed that report, twisted the law to hunt her down. We have witnesses, hospital staff, the roadside crew who pulled her through. Your friends in the department. They're peeling back now. One call from a judge who remembers real justice, and your firm's under the microscope." The bluff from the fixer had been a feint. The club's network, retired badges, honest clerks owed favors from old rescues, had unraveled Mark's web overnight. A phone buzzed in his pocket, and his face paled as he glanced at the screen. Messages confirming the warrants dissolved, investigations launched into his connections. The diner's windows reflected the standoff, the highway empty as if the world held its breath. Sienna pushed open the door then, stepping into the light, with Harley cradled close, her sundress fluttering in the breeze like a flag of reclaimed strength. The baby stirred, a soft coo cutting the tension, drawing eyes that softened even among the suits. "It's over, Mark," she said, voice steady, threaded with the quiet thunder of survival. "I left because of what you became, the control, the threats. Harley deserves better. We both do." Mark's mask shattered, desperation cracking through. "You think you can just walk? I built everything for us." But his words rang hollow against the circle of faces, Vance's unyielding gaze, Lena's fierce nod, Jax's calm readiness. Rook placed a hand on Sienna's shoulder, an anchor of chosen family. "She walks with us, and if you follow, you meet the iron." The enforcers backed toward the SUV, Mark lingering a beat longer, eyes darting as reality sank in. No violence erupted. Justice here was poetic, not brutal, a revelation under the open sky, corruption exposed by the light of unbreakable oaths. He climbed in, the engine roaring to life, tires spinning gravel as they fled, swallowed by the horizon's haze. The convoy exhaled, cheers low and resonant, the scent of relief mingling with the diner's greasy promise of coffee and pie. Sienna sank against Rook, tears hot on her cheeks, Harley's warmth binding the moment. "Thank you," she whispered, the words a bridge to the future. Back at the rally by midday, the sun climbed high, bathing the grounds in golden warmth as the brothers celebrated, not with reckless abandon, but quiet toasts around the fire pit, stories flowing like the beer from coolers. Vance raised his mug, the circle complete with renegades and iron promise alike. "To Harley," he said, "born on the road, carried by the promise." Laughter rippled, Harley's name already legend among them, a symbol of redemption pulled from the brink. Sienna watched Rook interact with the child, his scarred hands gentle as he bounced him on a knee, ghosts of his brother's loss fading in the boy's innocent gaze. The club had mended her fractures, weaving her into their tapestry of loyalty, where family wasn't blood, but the ride shared through storms. As the day waned, engines hummed in preparation for departures, but Sienna chose to stay, a tent her own, supported by hands that had delivered her son under Farrell lights. Rook lingered nearby, the horizon stretching endless before them. "The road's long," he said, voice gravelly with unspoken hopes, "but you're not riding it alone." She smiled, Harley asleep in her arms, the desert wind whispering of new beginnings. In this forge of courage and quiet honor, they'd faced down shadows, emerging stronger, a legacy of sacrifice, where one promise echoed into many, carrying the roar of redemption across the miles. Thank you for riding this journey with us. These tales of iron promises and chosen hearts wouldn't echo without you. If the road calls for more stories of quiet courage and unbreakable bonds, hit that subscribe button and join the convoy. We'll see you on the next horizon.